From Paramount Pictures, it's the 1976 fantasy adventure King Kong, directed by John Guillermin, starring Jeff Bridges, Charles Grodin, and Jessica Lange.
Well, here's to the big one.
Welcome to Reading Between the Lines. I want to remind our audience once again that when you're watching these reviews, there are going to be spoilers. The 1976 version of King Kong was produced by Dino De Laurentiis. This is coming fresh off of the heels of 1975's Jaws, and that was the big summer blockbuster. And one of the things about it is it had the mechanical shark. And this movie promised something even greater, a mechanical giant Kong, 40 feet tall, all the trimmings. Now, Kong has been done 3 times, this version of the story. Originally done in 1933, directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, where they put together this big jungle fantasy. And so we get basically the entire story of how we conceive Kong, from Skull Island to the damsel in distress, to the giant wall, to the dinosaurs, and then to the capture, and then all the way back to New York City. So all of that is set up in the very first movie, and it is a classic, and it still holds true today. You can still watch the 1933 version of Kong and still be entertained today. So the 1976 version is basically trying to capture that and also capture the momentum of what Jaws did in 1975. Now, in order to do this, Dino De Laurentiis got a guy by the name of Carlo Rambaldi. Now, Carlo Rambaldi was a creature designer, and his most famous creatures are going to come later after Kong, but Kong was his first true big major creature creation in this 70s blockbuster era. Later on, he will do the creatures for things like Alien, and most importantly, E.T., which is probably the work that he's most recognized for. And so he decided to build this 40-foot robot, okay, to make Kong the spectacle that it is. Now, the next version of this is the 2005 Peter Jackson version. So when we are trying to look at the 1976 version of Kong, we're going to kind of have to look at all 3 versions a little bit. So I want to kind of highlight some things, because I'm a big King Kong fan. I love all the Kong movies, all the way to the King Kong original sequel, Son of Kong, to things like Mighty Joe Young, okay, all the way up to Kong Skull Island. I mean, all of those Kong movies, I just love them. But we're going to look at these 3 particular movies because it's basically the same story, and they're all based off of one another. And they all bring things to the table, I think, that are enjoyable. So when you look at the 1933 version of the movie, to me, what they really capture and do a really good job with is Skull Island itself. Just the mystery of the island, and Kong fighting the Tyrannosaurus Rex. You get the stop motion action of Willis O'Brien, and it's just a great culmination of using the dinosaurs alongside Kong in this jungle fantasy, and it works really well. So Skull Island, to me, is captured very, very well in the first movie. To me, that's the strength of the movie. The weaknesses of the 1933 version of Kong is really like the dialogue. It's not a well-written dialogue script, so the dialogue doesn't really hold today as well as when it first came out. So there's some of it is kind of cheesy and so forth and so on, and some of it doesn't work. There is the classic line at the end of the movie, however, "It was beauty that killed the beast." That line really cements the ending of the movie and does a good job of that. But the real strength of that movie is really the creation of Skull Island. That's where the strength lies. When you go to the 2005 Peter Jackson movie, to me the whole first, because it's 3 hours long, but the first 2 hours of that movie does not work for me whatsoever. It takes forever to get to Skull Island. They have some side stories that don't work for me, and you'd have to watch the movie and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's some side stories that they're trying to intertwine that doesn't work. The whole natives on the island doesn't work for me. But what really does work is when they get to New York City. Now, when they get to New York City, that is majestic. Peter Jackson does a great job of creating a 1930s New York City, and it is beautiful. All the way from Kong sitting on the ice pond, all the way to climbing up to the top of the Empire State Building, fighting airplanes. It is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. And to me, that's the strength of that movie. Now we're going to go to our movie that we're looking at today, which is the 1976 version of Kong. And to me, the strength lies in its script. I actually like this story idea a whole lot better, where you've got an oil executive, played by Charles Grodin, who goes out there to the island because they believe that's where the oil is. Okay? And when they find out that there isn't oil, they have to bring something back, and they bring back Kong. And so I like that interpretation of the story. So to me, the strength of that for me is that. The second strength for me is the actors. To me, the best acting in the three Kong movies comes in this movie. Jeff Bridges is great. Charles Grodin is great in their parts. Jessica Lange, she's good in moments. She's kind of weak in others. This was her first big movie role right here. And so she's good in some and she's not so good in others. She plays basically the beauty. She plays the sexy femme fatale, so to speak, in this movie, because they do try to make this movie a love story between the gorilla and the girl. Okay? There's some other great actors in this movie as well. Some of my favorite supporting actors of all time are in there, like Ed Lauter. I like him a whole lot. He's wonderful in things like The Longest Yard, to Raw Deal, to Seabiscuit. You've seen, when you see Ed, you know what he is, okay? And then Rene Auberjonois, he's done a lot of different things all the way up to Star Trek. Also, he was in the sitcom Benson. He's just a wonderful actor, and he's in this as well. A huge shout out for a dancer by the name of Kenny Long, who plays the masked gorilla, who's basically playing the step-in for the groom of Kong. And he does all of these tribal dances, and he is wonderful. He really throws everything at it, and that's another thing I like about this movie. To me, of the three movies, this is the one where they got the natives right, because I really like the native interaction, and I like how the natives conducted themselves in this movie over the other two movies by a large margin, as a matter of fact. All the way up to where they kidnap the Jessica Lange character, Dwan, where they kidnap her, and then they put her, of course, into the bridal gown. And one of the things that they're doing is they're giving her, a drug, a narcotic, to keep her kind of calm and easy while they bring her out to the temple to have her sacrificed to Kong. So all of that type of stuff works for me. So I really, really like the tribal aspect of that in this movie a whole lot better than I do in the other two movies. One of the problems in this movie is getting the giant 40-foot tall robot to work, and they just couldn't get it work. In fact, there's only about 15 seconds of actual footage of the robot. Steven Spielberg, when he did Jaws, had some of the same problems where they couldn't get the shark to work, and he basically changed how he was going to do the movie. And one of the things he did, of course, was he was just trying to create suspense with trying to show the presence of the shark through music and through subtext to give us the scare factor, and it works really, really well in that movie. So they didn't have to rely on the mechanical shark. Well, the problem with Kong is you got to have a Kong. So it's not something that you can simply, do like they did in Jaws, okay? Because there's going to be a lot of interaction between Kong and, of course, the Jessica Lange character. And so they had problems with that. So what they had to do then is they had to resort to a monkey suit. And then that's where you enter Rick Baker. Rick Baker had always wanted to do a Kong thing, but one of the things that hurts him in this particular job and campaign was they just didn't have the time to create the type of gorilla suit that he wanted. So really what they concentrated mostly on was the head. And so that's one of the things that they get really, really right in this movie is the facial expressions of Kong, and the interaction between Kong's facial expressions and the Jessica Lange character work really, really well. So when you watch this movie, you're going to see a lot of headshots of Kong and a lot of headshots of the giant robotic arm. And so those are the two major things that you get. They really weren't happy, Rick Baker, they weren't really happy with the bodysuit because they just didn't have the time. But I mean, it works well. There's certain shots where it works well. There's certain shots where it doesn't work well. But overall, I think that, the Kong thing works. If there's a major special effect that doesn't work in the movie, it's the giant snake. The giant snake. It doesn't work. When I saw it originally, I was a kid. I was about 10 years old when I saw this movie. And I loved it. Of course, I'm a kid. I like, monsters and stuff like that. Great. But today, watching it today, you look at the snake and everything else, and you kind of go, and you kind of roll your eyes at that a little bit. Because that's really, to me, the only true special effect that doesn't really work well in this movie. All the other ones, they're still passable. They're still very passable today. Very much like when you watch The Kong of 1933. A lot of those special effects and stuff, they're still passable today. They still work, in this movie, they all work pretty much, and they all carry over, but you don't get the technical brilliance that you get from Peter Jackson in New York City. Even Peter Jackson, when you look at the first two-thirds, the first two acts of that movie, a lot of special effects don't work in that movie. There are some things that really don't work, like the Brontosaurus chase. That was kind of horrendous. Some of the stuff that they do on the sea, it's kind of, but when they get to New York City, they get it right, and that's just very beautiful. Jeff Bridges plays Jack Prescott, a primate paleontologist who stows away on the oil exploratory vessel, who wants to get a free passage, so to speak, in order to get to Skull Island, the mysterious island that he's heard the rumors and stuff about. And Jeff Bridges really carries the movie. He is the hero of the movie. Jeff Bridges does a good job playing opposite of Charles Grodin's Fred Wilson, who is the oil executive in charge of this mission of trying to find the oil out there on Skull Island. And their dynamic of going back and forth one another is really entertaining. Then you enter Jessica Lange, who's basically a survivor from a yacht disaster who they end up rescuing on the sea, and they bring her in. She is an aspiring wannabe actress. Now, one of the things about Lange's performance, because there's some criticism here about the performance, is it's a little bit more over the top, but one of the things I look at is she's not given the best lines to deliver. If you watch the movie, she doesn't really have the best lines, and she does exactly what she needs to be. She needs to be sexual. They really went for the sex in this version of the movie. And so you're going to see some half nudes of her from here to there, and there's even the wonderful scene where you've got Kong who gives her a bath. Okay, so there's a lot of sexual innuendo played against Kong and the Jessica Lange character, Dwan. Okay, and some of it works, some of it doesn't work. But I think she does a good job in the movie portraying that particular character. There are two other things that really stand out to me about this movie. One is the cinematography by Richard Klein, and the other is the music by John Barry. Now, both these aspects really enhance the movie. The cinematography is wonderful. It's beautiful. They catch the island. They also catch New York City. It's just, in fact, Klein was nominated for an Oscar for his cinematography for this movie. And then, of course, there's the score by John Barry. The music is romantic, and it's also suspenseful, which needs to be in this love story between this Beauty and the Beast. And so those two aspects of the movie really enhance the movie, where you don't get that from the other two movies. Okay, the musical score for me in this movie is better than the other two musical scores, and the cinematography for me in this movie is better than the other two movies. And so those are two other aspects of the movie that I really appreciate when you're talking about it from a technical aspect. Now, there are a couple of scenes in the movie that I really find interesting because they're completely different than the other movie versions. And that one is when Kong breaks through the wall. Okay, they have this giant wall, and Kong breaks through it. To me, I love this version so much better than I do in the 1933 and the 2005, because the breaking through, falling through the pit trap with the chloroform and all of that stuff, to me that works the best. I really like that idea of him going through that wall, the way that they have him go through the wall and everything else. I really like that choice over the other choices in the other two movies. The other interesting choice is because they made this movie a contemporary piece, because the movie is set in the 1970s. It's set during an oil crisis, okay? And so one of the things about that time period, of course, you're talking about post-Vietnam, you're talking helicopters. So this is the only version of the three movies where Kong is on the World Trade Centers, okay? and he's going to be fighting helicopters instead of airplanes. Now, the reason why I like the choice of the World Trade Centers over the Empire State Building, because the Empire State Building, Kong doesn't have room to maneuver. I mean, he's at the top. He doesn't have a way to really maneuver, so there's not a whole lot of fighting. He's basically just getting shot. Where in this version, he has room to maneuver. This is one aspect where I wish the director would have used his choice a lot more carefully, because you've got these large, flat top buildings, and you could have had Kong really bouncing up and down and jumping and really knocking down helicopters. It's not to say that he doesn't get one, but the thing about it is that you have the space. And so I like the choice of the World Trade Centers, and I like the choice of the helicopters. I especially like the fact that Kong has maneuverability, because there is a part where he jumps from one tower to the other tower. So all of that is fun, okay? And so I think that you could really play that in more in fighting against the helicopters, because he actually has a battlefield in which he could fight, unlike being at the top of the Empire State Buildings. So to me, those were two major choices that I really like a whole lot more than what you see in 33 and in 2005, okay? I like the fact of the busting through the wall, and I love the fact that he's on the World Trade Centers, and that you're making it, since it's a contemporary piece, you're fighting against helicopters, okay? I just wish they would have explored the whole helicopter fight a little bit further, because I think they could have done a whole lot more things. And if somebody's out there going to make Kong, I really think that that's a great choice, because you're putting Kong on a battlefield that gives him a little bit of an advantage that he wouldn't have being on the Empire State Building. All in all, of the three versions, I enjoy the 1976 version the best. It might be because of the fact that the first Kong I ever saw was this version, and I saw it when I was a kid, so I have an attachment to the movie. But I just like the script better. I like the actors better. I like some of the choices that they make better. And on my scale of 0 to 100, I'm giving King Kong 1976 an 89. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you're seeing, please hit that subscribe button. You've been watching Reading Between the Lines.